From Nutrien Ag Solutions, I'm Senior Meteorologist Andrew Pritchard with your Canadian Prairie weather story for Monday, October 9th, 2023. We've got a pretty clear-cut forecast picture over the next 7 days, so this will probably be a rather brief forecast video. If we take a look at the picture right now, got a big area of low pressure spinning across eastern Canada, kind of just south of the Hudson Bay. Continues to kind of sit and spin there. It has ingested the remains of what was Tropical Storm Philippe and continues to bring gloomy, windy, rainy conditions to a lot of Ontario and Quebec. Now, sandwiched in between that, we've got, and when I say sandwiched in between, I mean sandwiched between another deep area of low pressure across the Pacific Ocean, bringing a lot of coastal activity to parts of British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest. Now, between those two features, we are quite quiet, clear across parts of the prairie, and quite warm across western portions of the prairie. Now, it's going to be a dry week for a lot of us here. We'll see some precipitation slide through portions of the prairie over the next 48 hours. Now, Monday morning, quiet as we look at the radar, and that's going to continue to be the case as we head through the rest of the day today. We'll talk about when that rain comes into western parts of the prairie here in a moment. Looking at temperatures, generally pretty mild across the western portions of the prairie. We're a bit cooler in the east, where we've seen more impact from that area of low pressure off to the east, more in the way of cloud cover, at times a little bit of very light precipitation activity, and in general getting that northerly feed of cooler air into the region. As we look at last week's precipitation, it was focused heaviest across southeastern parts of Saskatchewan into central and southern Manitoba. Meanwhile, we were drier as you made your way off to the north and to the west. Just some spotty areas of showers and storms, variable precipitation across portions of southern Alberta and southwestern portions of Saskatchewan. And so as such, with warmer, drier conditions across the region and without a real heavy soaking rain event, we've got those fire weather conditions beginning to expand again across parts of Alberta and southern and western parts of Saskatchewan. We've got those higher fire weather conditions to exercise some caution out there with those hot and dry conditions across the area. We have seen some recent hot spots popping up anywhere from northern Alberta, parts of northeastern British Columbia, down into portions of southern Alberta, central and southern Saskatchewan, and even southwestern portions of Manitoba, a couple of ongoing hotspots. Now, again, looking at the next 7 days of precipitation, pretty quiet across the prairie. The storm track continues to be focused, again, across coastal areas of British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest, with areas of low pressure then kind of ejecting across the Rockies and tracking south of the prairie. We've got another area of low pressure we'll watch here in just a moment that's going to bring some heavy rain to parts of the northern plains, the upper Midwest of the United States, but tracking generally south of the Canadian prairie. Now, the reason for that, got a big area of high pressure, again, focused over the prairie. Here's your low to the east, the low to the west, and then high pressure in between, and this pattern doesn't really change much. We see this area of high pressure across the prairies, across much of Canada, force this next low off to the south. So this is what that looks like right there. We see this next low eject across the plains, and then another one even following it. So this is a bit of a preview of the winter pattern here, at least initially. As we come through fall into winter with El Nino in place, we expect to see higher pressure, generally drier conditions, and generally milder conditions across the prairie, with that storm track generally focused off to the south. Now, here are the jet stream winds that follow here. Again, strong winds circulating the slow moving area of low pressure across the east. Got those very strong winds caught in the jet stream across the North Pacific that are rounding the base of the next trough here. It's bringing a lot of coastal flow to parts of British Columbia right now, and eventually to the Pacific Northwest, with, again, higher pressure, that ridging right in between, focused over the Canadian prairie. So as I just hit play on this and watch the jet stream winds, you'll see this focused area of flow, this next little storm system, come in south of the prairie. The ridge holds on across the prairie. Here comes this low now ejecting way down here across the central and southern plains. So we'll talk about showers and storms, maybe some severe weather across the Midwest, the central plains of the United States, but you see up here much quieter conditions, high pressure just spinning away. And as I just drag the slider deeper, that's Thursday. This is now Friday, October 13th. This is now Saturday and Sunday. Maybe seeing a little disorganized system coming up over the top of the ridge there. But then, in general, the pattern reloads. We see ridging off across the western U.S. And as this next low tries to eject, hypothetically here, mid next week, we're getting a bit out into the future, but you see the pattern just continue. This next low, it wants to dive south and really intensify across the central United States. So the outlook is rather dry across the Canadian Prairie over the next 7 to 10 days. Now, looking at the precipitation forecast here, this will make a little bit more sense to you all. We'll go ahead and bring it back here to Monday. Again, rain to the east, rain to the west, dry across the prairie. We start to see some showers and storms across Alberta and southwestern Saskatchewan midweek, starting late Tuesday into Wednesday as this next low begins to eject. But the high, again, while it forces a little bit of light precipitation from western and southern Alberta into maybe far southwestern and southern Saskatchewan, we see the main area of low pressure and the broader area of precipitation really start to organize and intensify on Thursday into Friday across the Central Plains, the upper Midwest, well south of the Prairie, with high pressure holding on. That takes us into what should be a quiet weekend. We see high pressure dominating across the Canadian Prairie, across Western Canada, and then as our next area of showers and storms, our next area of low pressure tries to make its way in, likely going to see the most favored storm track off to the south, but we'll watch for maybe some precipitation, some moisture impacts across the prairie as we get into mid next week. This would be October 17th, 18th, and 19th when we're talking about maybe the next best chance for some moisture across the prairie. So as we compare the Euro on the left, the GFS on the right, both tell the same story. Very little precipitation over the next 7 days across the prairie. Much of it focused west, south, and east of the prairie with lighter precipitation north. This really has just cut a hole in the precip across North America and placed it right over the prairie, with the exception being, again, western Alberta, southern Alberta, maybe extremely far southwestern Saskatchewan picking up some of those showers, but this is rather light precipitation. We're talking about a half an inch or less in most areas. Now, those temperatures, cooler in the east, much more mild in the west. We'll see the temperatures in the west begin to moderate some and cool off on the backside of the midweek storm that again tracks south of the region, but generally holding on to temperatures that are probably going to be a degree or two, maybe 3 degrees above normal as we head through the rest of the week. So a big adjustment downward from 24 for the high today in Calgary down to 13 on Wednesday, but that's really closer to where you should be this time of year, if not still a couple degrees warmer than average. So even though we drop 10 degrees over the next 48 hours, we're still not going to fall below where we should be this time of year. And again, that is very typical of a strong El Nino across the Canadian Prairie. Temperatures just generally mild and continuing to whiff on the storm track. So, I've been talking a lot about the long-term outlook across the prairie, and, I'm going to just ad-lib here without a slide, but I know the big question is, when do we get moisture? And my answer has always been, with El Nino, there's increasing reason for optimism here. We remove La Nina, which is one of the biggest instigators of drought across the Canadian Prairie. So doing that, we're already going into the winter and the next 2024 growing season, not necessarily with the deck stacked against us with La Nina. So that's good news. But with El Nino, as you see, it doesn't necessarily stack the deck in our favor either. We've got a much stronger jet stream, a really active storm track across North America. That's good. That's step one, certainly, to have an active pattern across North America. But for a lot of at least the first half of this winter, the typical storm track is focused south of the prairie. So it's a game of patience I think we're going to have to play here for prairie moisture. I think we'll see relief, but it might be more like a 6-month game here versus a 6-day or 6-week time frame here with, a sudden increase in moisture. I think it may be frustrating, but I think, at times we'll see that storm track pay off with some heavier moisture across the prairie. Saskatoon, here's your next 10 days, a very similar look. We drop off big time midweek, but still holding on to temperatures that are near average, if not a little warmer than average. Regina, you see that dip, and then you rebound next week. Winnipeg, you're seeing the cooler temperatures already, so you're pretty steady. As we head through the week here, you can pretty much count on a high of around 10 or 11 degrees as we head through the week into the weekend, with those lows rebounding somewhat. Pretty chilly here, the chance of frost over the next day or two, but then rebounding a couple degrees above zero for the lows as we head through the rest of the week into the weekend. Have a great week. We'll talk to you again Monday, October 16th.